The European Union has narrowly passed a significant law to protect nature, a key component of Commission President Ursula von der Leyen's European Green Deal. The nature restoration law mandates recovery measures on 20% of the EU's land and sea by 2030, expanding to all degraded ecosystems by 2050. The law survived a close vote in Strasbourg, but was diluted on several points. César Luena, a Spanish MEP, hailed the law as a huge social victory, emphasizing its purpose to serve nature, not to act against any individual. The law aims to counteract the rapid decline of nature driven by climate change, pollution, the land and sea exploitation. It also seeks to help the EU achieve biodiversity targets it has previously missed. However, the law faced opposition from European People's Party, the center-right group to which von der Leyen belongs. Von der Leyen. Critics, including the EPP, the European People's Party, and the far-right Identity and Democracy group, argued that the law would harm food security and burden producers already struggling from the pandemic and energy crisis. Scientists have refuted these claims with an open letter signed by 6,000 scientists, stating that restoring nature would enhance food security, aid fisheries, create jobs, and save money. Guy Pierre, a conservation biologist, criticized the spread of misinformation by lobby organizations. The health of Europe's nature is in a dire state, with over 60% of its soils unhealthy and 81% of habitats in poor condition. A recent study found that the abundance of farmland birds has halved in the past 40 years. The law's approval was met with mixed reactions, with farmers protesting against it and climate activists, including Greta Thunberg, supporting it. So that's the summary, and this is a big deal. 20% of the EU's land and sea by 2030, and expanding to all degraded ecosystems by 2050. There's another one in the New York Times. Let's put this up here on the screen. If the New York Times doesn't block me right away. So it says the same thing, approved by 336 votes in favor, 300 against, and 13 abstentions. Very close. To restore 20% of all degraded nature areas on land and at sea. And supposedly, if there's farming opposition, that means that a degraded natural area would include probably industrial farming land to an extent. Europe's been battling the consequences of climate change with record heat, droughts, and floods. More than 61,000 people died last year in Europe due to extreme heat, and researchers predict the months ahead could be worse. Views the nature restoration bill as essential to Europe's future. 81% of the continent's natural space is in poor condition. Restoring biodiversity is seen as vital for preventing an ecosystem collapse and achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions across the bloc by 2050. So, yeah, 20% is a fifth of all degraded land, and maybe all land in the EU. So it's definitely key to keeping and preserving biodiversity, let alone trying to restore and enhance biodiversity. And carbon sequestration from functioning ecosystems can definitely help to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. There's going to be struggles in land use changes, but it can be seen as a positive, optimistic thing if we all work towards these goals. And I think the big thing, definitely in the United States, is that no one wants to see top-down enforcement without bottom-up support. So no one wants the federal government to come in and say, this is how it has to be, make it work. without having the resources and assets and programs in place to actually facilitate those changes, that's when, in my experience, farmers become resentful, because that's another thing that is on their plate, another expense, potentially another time commitment, and they're not getting any additional funding or resources or training or education, anything to be able to do that. So this is a big deal. A fifth of land area in the EU. It's commendable. It's something that we need everywhere in the world, probably, and probably more than this. Massive resources going towards land conservation and preservation and habitat restoration. But it should also be accompanied with massive programs and resources for people to actually do this work successfully. So we'll see what happens, but big news in the European Union.